We welcome all of you back. SEC Football Media Days, day 2 from the Grand Hyatt in downtown Nashville, but we shift gears and head east to Knoxville, Tennessee for our weekly visit with Tony Basilio. I saw you playing the guitar earlier, so I know you're ready and raring to go.
Fired up, man. I'm working on Led Zeppelin, Ramble On. I'm learning the melody. I've been assigned that by my group, so.
Can you play Rocky Top?
I mean, I could, but I don't have the core. I'm not prepared to do that right now.
I got you. Don't want it.
Were you asking right now, or can
Well,
he?
I mean, we play it out all the time.
Can you? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We play that. We play Down the Field. We play Fight Vols Fight. We play Tennessee Waltz. I know all the Tennessee songs.
Gotcha. That's important where you live.
It's very important.
What has this last week been like once the news came out? What's your show been like?
It's been pretty interesting. You know, I was on the air Friday when the news broke, George, and it was weird because the phones really didn't ring like you would think. And you've done this a long time. And some days you think the phone's going to ring off the hook, and they don't. And some days you don't think the phone will ring at all, and they're, it doesn't mean people aren't listening. But it was interesting because I think there's such a fatigue, and then as it relates to the NCAA, just a lack of belief in what they can do. So I had Adam Sparks on yesterday, who really has led the coverage of this for the Knoxville News Sentinel. He's done an incredible job on the story, just incredible. And Adam told me that he's been sifting through about 5,000 text messages and several thousand additional pages that they've gotten through FOIA, as well as the NCAA ruling. And he has a treasure trove of stuff. I mean, he's the guy that's released all the stuff about, some of the emails that Fulmer and the chancellor were sending back and forth to each other, and several other things, like a total document dump that he received. But I think most people are really appreciative of the fact that it's behind Tennessee. They can now get on to the business of going full strength in the Josh Heupel era. And I'll be honest with you, this fan base deserves that. They've been steadfast throughout the whole deal. They've been loyal throughout the whole deal. They've continued going to football games throughout the whole deal. I've often said that if you let a place like the University of Florida go through the 13 or 14 lost years Tennessee just went through, they'd have 30,000 people at a game instead of 70,000 season ticket holders. And I mean that. These people here, they deserve some success now, and I think they're going to get it.
It's an incredibly loyal fan base. I want to take you back to kind of when all this started, because it seems any school can go one of two ways. They can either say, by God, we are fighting this until we have our last breath, or you can go the other way, which Tennessee did, and said, okay, look, we know enough to know something's going on here. We're going to cooperate. We're going to do, everything within our power to minimize the damage. Who do you think philosophically led that charge?
I think the chancellor here led the charge. I think she's done a tremendous job. Donde Plowman's been terrific. So initially, they wanted the athletic director, Danny White, when he was fresh on the job. And this is all thrown in their laps. You got to go back in time here. But they had wanted initially at the university level Tennessee to agree to some self-sanctions, including a bowl ban. And he said no. No reason to do that. So he gets some credit. But he did not take the floor on this. She took the lead. She captained the ship and did it masterfully. So Adam Sparks again yesterday, and it was the most interesting appearance he made with us, but he shared with me that up in Cincinnati, he witnessed, and this isn't something he wrote about, but he witnessed Donde Plowman visiting with somebody on the board who they were going before, the infractions committee, who was in her spot at a university that got slapped by the NCAA in the last several years. And Donde Plowman walked up to her and said, hey, listen, when this happened to you, it was out of your control. And this happening to us is out of our control. But we didn't have a system in place to allow you to get off with minimal damage. But now you do have that in place. And she basically was saying to her, hey, you've been in this spot before. Please remember what it felt like. And she worked that committee. But not only did they work the committee, Adam let me in on something, George, which was really interesting. So Tennessee appealed to the Attorney General of the state of Tennessee, who wrote a rather strong letter saying, look, if you knock these people out of a postseason berth, either this year or next year, because they have a chart. The chart says if you commit the number of violations that Tennessee committed, minimum 1 year ban, probably 2 postseason, which would have knocked Tennessee out of a playoff berth next year. The Attorney General of the state of Tennessee said, if you do that, we will see you in court. And he meant it. Now, Adam told me that when the time came, and this is an interesting designation, George, to kind of wrap your brain around. This is an interesting little tidbit here. He said that when they did that, the word was that the NCAA had already closed the file of Tennessee they were going to hand to the committee. They allowed Tennessee a special dispensation to allow that to be put in the file. They wanted the committee to see, the NCAA did, that Tennessee was willing to see them in court. They chose to put that in that file. And some people around it feel like that was the impetus whereby they decided, you know what, you fell on your sword. You have already docked yourself 16 scholarships. So we're going to tack on an $8 million fine. We're going to tack on 10 more scholarships, and we're going to call it a day. And that's what they did. And I don't think the NCAA, George, at this point in time, has any guts for ending up in a court of law. I don't think they have the courage for it these days.
Well, they haven't won since, they haven't won in court since the Peloponnesian Peloponnesian War. So
whatever it was,
you're mixing whatever that word is, they haven't been very good in court for a while. And, Tony, about the only thing they have to hang their hat on anymore is that they run the NCAA tournament. And I don't mean to be ugly about this, but it's virtually impossible to screw that up. It'd be like what I said Sunday. I had a panel, any moron could have done that hour and 45 minutes. I happen to be the moron that did. But if you have good enough stuff, you can't screw it up.
That's right. And from the NCAA, what's interesting is their enforcement end hasn't caught up to the chart. The chart they're following, George, or they want these committees to follow, is the chart of 5 years ago, which I didn't realize. And I don't know that Tennessee really knew that. But they had to make up their own punishment for Tennessee because this is really one of the first cases in the new, what they're calling the new Constitution era. And it broke the heart of some national media people who really wanted to see Tennessee get punished. But Tennessee got a slap on the wrist. And they come out of this thing. I don't know how they've come out of this thing a couple and a half years later. But they've come out of this thing with one of the bright young coaches in the sport. A team that won 10 games last year, a team that's recruiting really well, and a team that, by what happened here, for all intents and purposes, got nicked and not injured. And most times when something like that happens in school, before this deal, it took you a good 5 years to dig out. It took Tennessee, I don't know, less than one season. It's really strange. It's really crazy to think that we're here right now.
By the way, great minds think alike. We had Adam on yesterday, too. I would suggest that when this is all over, the Knoxville News Sentinel needs to send him on a vacation, if for no other reason. His eyes have got to be bug-eyed at
Wow.
those 5,000 texts and stuff. I mean, what in the world? Crazy.
Yeah, and he told me, he said, when I first got him, I was so excited. My adrenaline was going. He said, I stayed up all night and poured coffee down my throat. He said, I set aside like 15 or 20 of the originals.
Yeah.
Thinking these will be my story. He said, I haven't gone back to any of them right now. There was so much stuff in those texts. He said, and I'm finding more and more of it. And I just think that what Adam found and then that reporting is the last of a bygone era. College football was so fun when your school got a recruit and it was due to good recruiting, and the school down the street got a recruit and it was due to cheating. And now we're all paying the kids. Now there's no
now it's all legalized.
Yeah, it's like you've seen The Wizard. You know, you've looked behind the curtain. I didn't want to look behind the curtain. I liked it. You know, I grew up a wrestling fan. I liked it when they presented it as sport. You know, and Tojo Yamamoto, when you were a young George Plaster, was down there in the fairgrounds doing his thing. And Jackie Fargo.
I don't know those names.
And you really had to be old when Cooper and Martin, which was a grocery store, had a show called Let's Go to the Races. And you would get a card, you know, when you bought something. And the guy told me as an 8-year-old, he said, there's not one winning ticket in this entire box.
I remember that. You watched the recorded races like on a Friday night, right?
Yes. Jack Dries was the announcer. And it really hurt. It hurt to know that it was rigged. Kelly, normally you could take this as long as you want, but we got to be out by about 2:41. So look at the clock. Do your best. The big hand is for the hour. The little
God.
Here we go,
George.
He has none, and I like Tony better now that he said he was a wrestling fan, because on Sundays I stay and watch A&E, and we're watching all those things about the WWE, and they're trying to find their treasures. That's pretty good stuff, Tony. Pretty good stuff.
I love old school wrestling. I often think how much fun it would have been to be back in the 50s and 60s when it was presented as real, even the early 70s, and watch those people and just watch the fans.
I went and I bought, this is off the beaten path, obviously, but I bought a car for my daughter. She bought it actually, but I found it in Memphis, and this guy was a wrestler back in the day, and he knew Jerry Lawler. And I did not know that Jerry Lawler was a huge Cleveland Brown fan. And he told him that I was coming to town, but Jerry Lawler was out of town. He was like, dang, I wish I'd have met Kelly. So that was pretty cool for me. I did not know he was a Cleveland Brown fan, and he knew Kelly Holcomb. That was really awesome for me.
That's pretty small worldy right there.
I'll tell him it's overrated.
I agree. It is overrated. So when we're talking about this stuff about my friend Jeremy, you know, George told me to weigh in if I wanted to or not, but I gotta ask this. You see where they had 11. I've always wanted to ask this question to somebody, and you might not even be able to answer it. I don't know, but they had 11 games vacated in 2019 and 2020. Like, who cares? Does anybody care about that? Like, what does that mean? Like, I don't understand what the vacating wins back for 2 or 3 years ago. What does that mean? Like, explain that to me if you can. If you can't, we'll move on. I don't know.
No, a vacated win by the NCAA is the dumbest thing in the world. It's the reason they need to be stopped. I mean, they just need to be stopped.
Gosh.
Kelly, here's the deal. With a vacated win, if you and I play, right, and we have a vacated football game, you still keep the loss, but I don't get the win.
I don't understand it.
See if that makes any sense.
No.
You get to keep the loss. We played. The loss counts against you, but the win doesn't count for me. You don't get a win. You don't get a win on a vacated football game. And some egghead in some place up in Indianapolis is sitting around worried about that. That is about the dumbest damn thing in the world. But that's where we are.
And I'll tell you another dumb thing. And when we were doing the sports speaker series the other night, there was a guy that brought this up. I think it was the Festmeyer guy, George, but I don't like where they took away the athletic dorms. That was the funnest thing in my college experience, to live with all my teammates. It was, you had fights in there, you had things go on in there, but that's part of the college experience, and it's not coming back. I get that, but I just don't understand. Like, it's the NCAA. They vacate wins, they take away the dorm for the kid. I just don't understand it, Tony. I really don't. It's just criminal to me.
You know, the whole dorm concept. Swamp Rat Dewey Warren, who I used to work with back in the day, who played quarterback back in the '60s, he said that's the way that teams police themselves. He said if a guy acted up, the coaches didn't need to deal with him, because when you got back to the dorm that night and the seniors lived here, the juniors lived here, the freshmen, sophomores. Hey, look, if one of the sophomores or freshmen did something they shouldn't have done, or even one of the juniors, they had to answer to people at the dorm that night. He said, and that's kind of been lost. And, you know, I've never really considered that dynamic, but that's probably accurate.
Oh, it's totally accurate. I can remember that stuff happening. I can remember guys when I went as a freshman, and I was fortunate enough to start, but I can remember all that stuff, and guys come back to the dorm. And if you did something wrong, man, some of those guys were rough, and some of those guys handled you, and it was, I mean, that's just part of college, and I don't understand why the NCAA. It's kind of like our government stepping into something that they shouldn't step into, and I understand that they stepped into this Jeremy Pruitt case, but with the Attorney General, but I don't understand some of the things that the NCAA does, Tony. It's just it's beyond my anything that I think of, you know.
Well, this is why the system's broken. And this is why we've always, I mean, how stupid does it look now what Pruitt and his staff were accused of doing? All the money they paid out, it's not even worth a good linebacker today.
No.
In the open market. I mean, what are we doing?
That's true.
Think
What
about
are
it.
we
It's
doing?
stupid. What are we doing?
You know, and I asked, you know, obviously hadn't read a bunch as you have with all the stuff that's going on, but Pruitt, I do say that, you know, Jeremy is a good dude. He is a good-hearted guy, and you read some of the stuff, and he gave a mom $300. He gave somebody else some money. I mean, that just comes from the morality of your heart. And that stuff's been going on for a long time, Tony. It really has. I can remember being in college, and you hear stuff that your college coach did. And I don't know if it involved money, but you know, he would help you. Guys help, and that's what makes this so frustrating for me, because I love Jeremy. Think he's a good guy. He just, I guess he was over his head a little bit. But when you're doing stuff like that, how can you look down on that?
I would never look down on anybody that hands a kid money or parent money or any of that. The thing about what those guys did is, when you look at it in its totality, right, is it was just so reckless and just so like silly. I mean, because here's the thing you want to do. If you're going to go that route, right, and you're going to be in the old college deal, you be like Nick and Kirby. You do those things, but you keep yourself away from it.
Right.
And you don't have anybody texting about it. That's the last thing you do. Right? I mean, that's, you know, we're just called, it's called, but you're right. And I think that he was in a spot where, you know, he was just a young kid getting an opportunity, and it was probably going really fast for him. And then he had an AD that was not guiding him either. So they had a weak athletic department around him, which didn't help. It just didn't.
No, and I'll throw it back to you, George, but I will say this, just a comment for me. That's why you don't text. That's why you don't text. If you're going to talk about something, you better call.
Hey, and Adam uncovered a text where these coaches are going, hey, look, we're paying for this guy, so you can't text me on this phone saying we're going to pay him. I mean, come on, guys. Come on, guys. You don't.
They got everything on you. It's all in the cloud, Hoss.
Yeah, exactly.
Tony, I'll leave it this way. I taped an interview earlier today with Pat Forty, about the story he wrote. I'll reach out to you tomorrow. If you would like to have that, I'd love for you to, because it is one hell of an interview.
Well, he's got a real love. He loves the Tennessee fan base, doesn't he?
He sure does. He also compared John Calipari to Jimbo Fisher.
Well,
So,
he did.
Wow.
He did at the end of the interview. Anyway, tell people how they can hear all of the good stuff you're doing.
So I'm available over at tclub.team. Again, tclub.team. And we do it each and every day. And George, you're hustling down there, man. I love it.
I'm trying, you know.
You're hustling, brother. I love it.
I'm trying.
Tony, do
Listen,
you,
Hey,
do
it's
you have
more than I'm
anybody?
doing. It's more than I'm doing this week.
Do you have anybody to give a live report for Tennessee from down here, Tony?
Are you wanting to who's volunteering? I want to know who's volunteering.
I
could
do that if you need it.
Wow.
Oh,
Now, let me ask you
wow.
something.
So,
Let me ask you, will it be on the level, or are you going to do like Pat 40 and put it through your Vandy lens?
No, it'll be objective.
Okay. George,
Hey,
can
and
I count on that young man to deliver an objective report on the ball?
I hope so, but let me also say this. Okay. He better not charge you. It better be gratissimo.
Well, hey, that's a
Gratis.
nice price. Hey, Billy, just as long as you work in there that Tony Vols is the spawn of Satan, like you did on your podcast, just as long as you call Tony Vitello at some point the spawn of Satan, you got the job, man.
I'll make sure I do that.
Oh, man.
Thank you, guys.
Tony, you take care.
See you guys. Thanks.
See you, brother.
He is a hoot.